The council chamber floated in the center of Veltara, a massive ring world that sparkled against the darkness of space. Inside the grand hall, representatives from 47 different species gathered for their quarterly meeting. The Vrex sat on heated stone benches, their scales gleaming under the artificial lights. The Luminari hovered in their designated areas, their crystalline bodies refracting light into rainbow patterns. The Nethvoids existed as clouds of sentient gas contained within specialized force fields. Ambassador Taemin from Earth walked through the entrance 30 minutes after the session had begun. His footsteps echoed on the polished floor, drawing annoyed glances from several delegates. The human section was located near the back of the chamber, a small cluster of seats that often sat empty during votes. Taemin took his place without apology or explanation. Chairman Kelthor, a massive Vrex with deep crimson scales, was in the middle of discussing new taxation on Outer Rim trade routes. He paused briefly to acknowledge the human's arrival with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand before continuing. The proposed taxes would hit Earth's colonies particularly hard, but this was nothing new. Human concerns rarely made it onto the official agenda. Taemin waited patiently through 2 hours of debate. The council argued about territory disputes, resource allocation, and military positioning. When they finally opened the floor for additional business, he raised his hand. Kelthor sighed visibly before recognizing him. "The chair acknowledges Earth," Kelthor said, his tone suggesting he already regretted the decision. Taemin stood, his posture straight and professional. He held a small data chip in his hand. "Chairman, esteemed delegates, I come before you today with a simple announcement. Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing its membership from the Galactic Council." The chamber fell silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then laughter erupted from multiple sections. The Vrex delegation found it particularly amusing, their hissing chuckles filling the air. Even some of the normally stoic Luminari seemed to pulse with what might have been humor. "You cannot be serious," Kelthor said, still chuckling. "This is some kind of negotiating tactic, yes? What do the humans want now? Better trade routes? Lower taxes?" "No tactic," Taemin replied calmly. "No negotiation. Humanity has decided that our participation in this council no longer serves our interests. We will be closing our borders and terminating all external trade agreements within 30 days. All human personnel stationed on non-human worlds will return home. All joint projects will be concluded or transferred to other parties." The laughter faded into confused murmurs. Kelthor leaned forward on his bench. "You realize how insignificant human space is in the grand scope of the galaxy? You control what? Perhaps 2% of known territory? 42 colony worlds? This council represents thousands of systems." "I am aware," Taemin said. He walked down the aisle and placed the data chip on the chairman's podium. "This contains complete documentation of all services, contracts, and agreements being terminated. It also includes transition procedures for ongoing projects and lists of human personnel being recalled." "This is absurd," one of the Nethvoid delegates pulsed through its translator. "Humanity has been part of this council for nearly a century. You cannot simply leave." "We can, and we are," Taemin said. "The decision is final. Earth and her colonies wish you all well in your future endeavors." He bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect, then turned and walked toward the exit. "Wait," Kelthor called out. "At least explain why. What has prompted this sudden decision?" Taemin paused at the doorway and looked back. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Sadness, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion. "We have brought concerns to this council 173 times in the past decade. Requests for fair trade considerations, warnings about pirate activity in the outer sectors, proposals for mutual defense agreements, petitions for equal representation in council decisions. Every single one was dismissed, delayed, or denied. The council process takes time, Kelthor said defensively. All concerns are considered carefully. Of course, Tae-min said quietly. We understand. That is why we are removing ourselves as a concern. He left without another word. The council chamber buzzed with conversation after his departure. Most delegates seemed unconcerned. The Vreks laughed about human arrogance. The Luminary calculated that losing human trade would barely impact their economy. The Nethvoid speculated that humanity would return within a year, begging to rejoin. Kelthor picked up the data chip Tae-min had left and tossed it to his assistant. File this away somewhere. We will deal with the human tantrum later. He turned back to the assembly. Now, where were we? Yes, the taxation proposal. The meeting continued as if nothing important had happened. Outside, Tae-min boarded his ship and set course for Earth. Behind him, the great Veltara ring spun silently in space, beautiful and indifferent. Within a week, human ships began departing from every corner of the galaxy. Research stations powered down, trade outposts closed their doors, engineers packed their equipment, doctors transferred their patients to local care facilities. Teachers said goodbye to their students. There were no protests, no angry speeches, no dramatic gestures. Humanity simply left, quietly and efficiently, like workers finishing a shift and going home. The galaxy barely noticed. The mining world of Kepler 7th existed solely to extract rare minerals from its iron-rich crust. Massive automated refineries processed tons of ore every hour, feeding the industrial needs of a dozen nearby systems. The operation ran smoothly under Vrek supervision, had been running smoothly for 15 years. On the 21st day after humanity's departure, every refinery on the planet shut down simultaneously. Overseer Thraknor stared at the control panels in disbelief as red warning lights flooded the command center. His claws clicked frantically across the interface, trying to restart the systems. Nothing responded. The refineries sat silent and dark, half-processed ore cooling in the massive smelting chambers. "What happened?" demanded his supervisor through the communication link. "I do not know," Thraknor admitted. "The system just stopped. All of it. At once." They brought in the best Vreks technicians. The team spent 3 days examining every component, every circuit, every line of code. Physically, everything was perfect. The machinery was undamaged, but the control system refused to function. On the 4th day, one technician found a signature buried in the integration software. Jiwoo, human engineer, lead systems architect. They pulled her complete work files and stared at them in growing horror. She had designed a system that made 17 different alien technologies work together as one. Vreks processing units, luminary power crystals, Nethvoid sensors, and 14 other species contributions, all seamlessly integrated. Without Jiwoo's bridging code, they were just expensive parts that could not talk to each other. "Contact the human," Thraknor ordered. "She returned to Earth," his assistant replied. 2 weeks ago." Across the galaxy, similar situations bloomed like a slow-motion catastrophe. Station Meridian, a hub serving 6 different species, lost its gravity stabilization. The artificial gravity did not fail completely, but it became erratic. One moment normal, the next moment everything felt too heavy, then too light. Inhabitants grew sick from the constant changes. The station master discovered that the gravity system was designed by human physicist Dong-hyun. He had created a rotating schedule that accommodated every species' comfort needs, cycling through different gravitational strengths in different sections. The backup team could make the gravity work at one setting for everyone, which meant nobody would be comfortable. Medical facilities across 3 sectors discovered their advanced surgical bays were non-functional. The equipment was there, pristine and expensive, but the operating systems were locked. Dr. Hai-jin and her team had maintained the cross-species medical database that made the equipment work. Without her translation protocols, a surgical bay calibrated for luminary crystalline structures could not be adapted for Vrex-scaled biology. Hospitals that had performed complex surgeries on multiple species now could only treat their own kind. A Vrex patient needing surgery on a luminary station was out of luck. The medical director of one such station spent hours reviewing Hyejin's notes, trying to understand her work. The more he read, the more he realized the depth of what she had created. Every species had different biological markers, different pain responses, different cellular structures. Hyejin had cross-referenced all of it, made it accessible, made it usable. 3 weeks after the human departure, the Galactic Council received 47 emergency requests for assistance. Infrastructure failures, system malfunctions, operational disruptions. Each request traced back to the same root cause, missing human expertise. Chairman Kelthor called an emergency session. The atmosphere was very different from the last meeting. No one was laughing now. "This is a temporary situation," Kelthor announced, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We simply need time to adapt. The humans may have designed certain systems, but we can certainly learn to operate them. We can reverse engineer their work." "How long will that take?" asked a Luminari representative, her crystalline voice sharp with concern. "Kepler 7th produces 30% of the refined metals for our manufacturing sector. Every day it remains offline costs millions." "Our medical facilities are crippled," added a Nethvoid delegate. "We have patients requiring cross-species treatments that we cannot provide." "Then contact the humans," someone suggested. "Hire them as consultants." Kelthor's scales darkened, a sign of anger. "Absolutely not. That would be admitting we need them. It would give them leverage over us. No, we will solve this ourselves." "But Chairman—" "Enough!" Kelthor cut them off. "We are talking about human technology, simple, basic human work. They are not particularly advanced as a species. If they could design these systems, surely our best minds can understand them. I am authorizing research teams for each critical system. Give them the resources they need. We will have this solved within a month." The delegates reluctantly agreed, though many looked uncertain. Research teams were formed. The galaxy's brightest scientists and engineers were pulled from other projects and assigned to decode human systems. On Kepler 7, Thraknor watched his refinery teams work day and night, trying to restart the processing plants. They made small progress, getting individual components to function in isolation. But the integration remained a mystery. Jiwoo's code was elegant and efficient, built in layers upon layers of interlocking protocols. Understanding one part required understanding 10 others. "How long did the human work here?" Thraknor asked his assistant. 12 years, came the reply. "She arrived fresh from university and built this entire system from the ground up. 12 years of work. And they expected to duplicate it in a month." Thraknor felt a headache forming, which was unusual for a Vrex. He looked at Jiwoo's personnel file, at her picture. A young woman with tired eyes and a slight smile. In 12 years on this dusty mining world, she had been to exactly 3 council social functions. She had never won any awards, never received special recognition. She had simply done her work. Work that now, in her absence, proved to be irreplaceable. Back on Earth, Jiwoo sat in a small apartment in Seoul, watching the stars through her window. She felt lighter somehow, though she could not quite explain why. For the first time in 12 years, she was home. 2 months had passed since humanity closed its borders. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson, one trade route at a time. Captain Veltris commanded a Luminari cargo vessel traveling the route between the crystalline homeworld and the Vrex industrial colonies. The journey used to take 11 days. Now, on his 3rd trip since the humans left, it was taking 29 days. His ship burned twice as much fuel, carried half as much cargo, and lost money on every voyage. The route had not changed. The stars were still in the same positions, but the path his ship followed was completely different. Before, he had used the navigation charts maintained by human cartographer Dong Hyun and his team. Those charts accounted for gravitational wells, solar radiation patterns, subspace currents, and 1,000 other variables. The route was not a straight line, but a carefully calculated curve that used natural forces to assist travel. Now, without access to those constantly updated charts, Veltris used the old traditional routes, straight lines that fought against gravity instead of working with it. Safe routes, yes, but slow and expensive. "Why do we not simply recreate the human charts?" his first officer asked. "The Council is trying," Veltris replied. "They have been trying for 2 months. Mapping space is not difficult. Mapping it while accounting for every force that affects ship travel requires constant monitoring of millions of data points. The humans had satellites, monitoring stations, and calculation systems spread across the entire galaxy. They shared all that data freely. Across known space, 40% of interstellar trade had simply stopped. It was not profitable anymore. Companies could not afford the longer travel times and higher fuel costs. Goods that used to flow freely between systems now sat in warehouses. Economies that depended on trade began to contract. In the Varex Empire, Fleet Admiral Thokral faced a different crisis. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by 200 warships, the pride of Vrex military might. Each ship was powerful, heavily armed, capable of tremendous destruction. Together, they should have been an unstoppable force, but they could not fight as a fleet. The tactical coordination network was dead. The system that had allowed 200 ships to act as one, to coordinate their movements and concentrate their fire, no longer functioned. Without it, they were just 200 individual ships floating in the same area of space. Thokral reviewed the technical reports with mounting frustration. The network had been designed by human systems architect Sung Ho. It was a masterpiece of integration, linking Vrex targeting computers, luminary energy shields, Nethvoid sensors, and communication systems from a dozen other species into one unified command structure. "Can we not build our own network?" Thokral demanded. His chief engineer, a younger Vrex named Shaltir, looked uncomfortable. "We are trying, Admiral. But the human designed it to handle 47 different communication protocols simultaneously, translate them in real time, account for the time lag between ships, and predict enemy movements based on probability matrices. Our best estimate is that we can have a basic version working in 8 years. 8 years? Thokral's roar echoed through the bridge. The Kreth border raiders will not wait 8 years to test our defenses. As if summoned by his words, reports began flooding in. Pirate raids across the Outer Rim systems. The raiders struck with unusual precision, hitting targets that seemed randomly chosen but were all strategically vulnerable. They knew exactly which systems had lost their defenses, which trade routes were unprotected. Thokral suddenly remembered something. Years ago, human merchant Captain Bo-Ra had given a presentation at a military conference. She had talked about informal intelligence networks, about how human traders shared information about pirate sightings, suspicious activities, and dangerous areas. The military officers had barely paid attention. It seemed like small talk, trader gossip. Now Thokral realized what it really was. The humans had been the galaxy's early warning system. Their merchants traveled everywhere, noticed everything, and shared it all freely. Without them, the pirates operated in darkness, and the military was blind. On the crystalline world of Loomis Prime, medical director Su Jin faced her own nightmare. Not a human, despite her human name. She was Luminari, named by human parents who had briefly lived on Earth during a cultural exchange. She stood in the research laboratory, watching her team work. They were trying to rebuild the cross-species medical database. 2 months of effort had restored 3% of its functionality. Dr. Hyojin's database had contained medical information on 417 known species. It cross-referenced symptoms, treatments, drug interactions, and surgical procedures. It made universal health care possible. Sujin pulled up the calculation her team had made. At their current pace, it would take them 380 years to restore what Hyejin had maintained. 380 years. "We need a different approach," her lead researcher said. "Perhaps if we contacted the other species, asked them to each rebuild their own sections." "That is what we are doing," Sujin interrupted. "Every species working on their own data. But the database was not just a collection of files. It was a living, integrated system. Hyejin spent 20 years building it, updating it, finding connections between species that no one else noticed. She discovered that a Vrex medication could treat a Nethvoid condition. She found that a luminary healing technique could help human bone growth. None of us saw these connections because none of us looked across species boundaries the way she did. Back in the council chambers, Chairman Kelthor received the reports. Economic collapse, military vulnerability, medical crisis, infrastructure failure. The pattern was undeniable now. "We underestimated them," his assistant said quietly. Kelthor wanted to argue, but he could not. The data chip Taemin had left sat on his desk, still mostly unexamined. He picked it up, turned it over in his claws. How bad could it be? How much had the humans really done? He was afraid to look. Instead, he made an announcement. "We will adapt. We simply need more time and resources. Double the research budgets, triple them, whatever it takes." But deep down, in a place he did not want to acknowledge, Kelthor knew the truth. Time and resources could not replace a century of human work, could not replace people like Jiwoo, Donghyun, Sungho, Bo-Ra, and Hyejin, who had quietly, without recognition or appreciation, held the galaxy together. They were gone now, and the galaxy was falling apart. The distress signal reached the nearest station 4 hours too late. Colony ship Eternal Drift had been carrying 2,000 Nethvoid settlers to a new world when its life support systems failed. By the time rescue ships arrived, the vessel drifted cold and silent through space, its passengers frozen in their containment fields. The investigation was swift and damning. The atmospheric processors had been calibrated specifically for Nethvoid biology by human technician Young-Soo. He had spent 6 months on the project, carefully balancing the energy frequencies that sustained Nethvoid life forms. The ship's original systems could maintain basic containment, but the processors that recycled and refreshed the energy fields required constant fine-tuning. Young-Soo had left detailed maintenance logs. He had trained the Nethvoid crew in basic upkeep. But when a critical calibration drifted out of alignment, no one aboard knew how to fix it. The energy fields collapsed slowly over 3 days. The Nethvoids inside grew weaker, unable to maintain their coherence, until they simply dispersed into nothing. 2,000 lives lost because one human technician was no longer there to maintain a system he had built. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Suddenly, the infrastructure failures were not just inconvenient, they were deadly. Emergency sessions were called, fingers were pointed, blame was assigned. But none of it brought back the dead. 1 week after the Eternal Drift disaster, the Council's own headquarters experienced a catastrophic failure. The quantum communication array went dark without warning. In an instant, the Council members lost their ability to coordinate across their vast territories. The array was a marvel of engineering, capable of instantaneous communication across thousands of light years. It had been designed by human communications specialist Mi Young, who had somehow made 47 different species communication technologies work together in real time. Without it, Council members were forced to use traditional faster-than-light messaging. What used to take seconds now took days or weeks, depending on the distance. Real-time governance became impossible. Decisions that required immediate coordination could not be made. The bureaucracy that had run the galaxy ground to a halt. Chairman Kelthor stood in the silent communication center, staring at the dead equipment. His own assistant had to physically travel to his office to deliver messages now, like in some primitive era. The humiliation was almost worse than the practical problems. "How long to repair it?" he asked the head technician. The technician, a luminary named Torval, flickered with what might have been embarrassment. "We do not know how to repair it, Chairman. We do not even fully understand how it works. Mi Young integrated technologies that should not be compatible. She created translation protocols that we cannot decipher. We have been studying her work for 3 weeks. So far, we have identified approximately 8,000 separate integration points. Each one needs to be understood before we can even attempt repairs." "Then contact her," Kelthor said. "Offer her whatever she wants. Money, resources, anything." "We tried, Chairman. The humans are not accepting our communications. Their borders are closed, remember? On the frontier worlds, the collapse of central authority triggered unexpected consequences. Without reliable communication to the Council, colony governors found themselves cut off from the bureaucracy that had controlled every aspect of their lives. At first, it was terrifying. Then, slowly, something else happened. The colonies began governing themselves. On the agricultural world of Green Hollow, Governor Tamris gathered his advisory council. Representatives from 3 different species sat around the table, people who had lived and worked together for decades but had always deferred to the Galactic Council for major decisions. "We have not received any directives from the Council in 6 weeks, Tamris said. "The communication array is down. We are on our own." "So what do we do?" asked the Vrex farming coordinator. "We make our own decisions," Tamris replied. "We have been requesting permission to expand the irrigation network for 5 years. The Council kept denying it, said the environmental impact needed more study. But we know this world, we know what it needs. I say we build it." Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. For the first time in decades, they would act without waiting for permission from distant bureaucrats who had never set foot on their world. Across dozens of frontier colonies, similar conversations took place. Some worlds declared formal independence. Others simply stopped waiting for council approval and started solving their own problems. Many discovered they preferred local governance. The council had always been distant, slow, mired in politics that had nothing to do with their daily lives. The economic crisis deepened. The Vrex mining cartels, seeing their profits collapse due to failed infrastructure and blocked trade routes, staged open revolts. They refused to ship materials to the core worlds until their demands were met. The luminary research institutes, unable to fund their projects without trade revenue, began shutting down entire wings of their facilities. Brilliant scientists were laid off, decades of research abandoned. The Nethvoids withdrew from several joint projects, retreating into isolationism. Trust between species, always fragile, began to crack. Old prejudices resurfaced. The Vrex blamed the Luminari for not maintaining their share of infrastructure. The Luminari blamed the Nethvoids for pulling resources. Everyone conveniently forgot who had actually maintained the infrastructure. In a quiet office on a minor station, Junior Ambassador Jae Sung of the Trell species compiled a report. The Trell were an insectoid race, relatively new to the Council, and Jae Sung had been assigned the task of documenting the crisis. He had spent months gathering data, interviewing experts, studying the failures cascading across the galaxy. His report was devastating. Humanity had not just been another member species. They had been the invisible architecture holding everything together. They had bridged gaps between incompatible technologies. They had translated not just languages, but entire frameworks of thought. They had maintained systems that no one else even knew existed. and the council had treated them like servants. Jae-sung submitted his report to Chairman Kelthor with a heavy heart. He was Trell, not human, but he felt shame for what had been done. The humans had asked for so little, just basic respect, fair consideration of their concerns, a seat at the table that meant something. They had been denied even that. Kelthor read the report alone in his office late at night. Each page was another dagger of truth. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. The data chip Taemin had left sat on his desk, still waiting to reveal its full contents. Finally, Kelthor opened it and began to read. As the hours passed and the list scrolled on and on, he felt something he had not experienced in decades: fear. The data archaeology team worked in shifts around the clock, excavating the contents of the chip Ambassador Taemin had left behind 6 months ago. What they found made them wish they had looked sooner. Lead researcher Dalvik, a meticulous luminary with a reputation for accuracy, presented the preliminary findings to Chairman Kelthor. Her crystalline form pulsed with an emotion the chairman could not quite identify. Grief, perhaps, or shame. "We have processed approximately 40% of the data chip's contents," Dalvik began, her voice carefully neutral. "What we have found is beyond our initial estimates. Humanity did not just maintain systems, they were the system." She activated a holographic display. Numbers and charts filled the air between them. 73% of all cross-species communication protocols were designed and maintained by humans. Not just the translation software, but the fundamental frameworks that allow different species to communicate accurately. Linguistics specialist Su Jin and her team spent 30 years developing matrices that ensure when a Vrex says urgent, it carries the same weight as when a Nethvoid pulses the same concept. Without these matrices, we are not just speaking different languages. We are operating on different definitions of reality. Kelthor felt his throat tighten. "Continue." "The financial systems," Dalvik pulled up another chart. "Economist Kyung-soo created the clearinghouse algorithms that made interspecies trade possible. Consider the problem. Vrex economy is based on mineral resources. Luminary economy is based on energy production. Nethvoid economy is based on information exchange. How do you create fair exchange rates between rocks, light, and data?" Kyung-soo solved it. His algorithms prevented countless trade wars by finding equitable values across completely incompatible economic models. Without them, we have no standard for trade. Every transaction becomes a negotiation, and most species simply give up. The charts kept coming. Each one was another revelation. Navigation charts maintained by human astronomer Hyun Woo reconciled 47 different spatial measurement systems into one coherent map. The Vrex measure space by gravitational density. The Luminari measure by energy fluctuations. The Nethvoids measure by information flow patterns. Hyun-woo created a master chart that translated all these measurements into a universal standard. Without it, we are literally using different definitions of where things are located in space. Kelthor sank into his seat. How many humans were involved in maintaining these critical systems? Dalvik hesitated. "That is the most troubling part, Chairman. We have identified over 6,000 individual humans who provided what they classified as minor services, educational exchanges that allowed species to understand each other's cultures. Disaster relief coordination that mobilized resources across species boundaries. Conflict mediation that prevented small disputes from becoming wars. Cultural festivals that built personal relationships between species." 6,000, Kelthor repeated numbly, "and that is just the ones we have identified so far. We estimate the full number might reach 10,000 or more. But, Chairman, it is not just the number. It is what they did. Every human we have traced was working at the intersection between species. They were translators, integrators, bridge builders. They found the gaps and filled them. They noticed the problems no one else saw because they were the only ones looking across species boundaries instead of within them. Dalvik pulled up a specific file. Look at this. Human educator Wanshik ran a small program on Station 7. He taught mathematics to children from 12 different species. Seems minor, right? But he noticed that each species learned math differently. Vreks think in linear sequences. Luminari think in energy patterns. Nethvoids think in probability clouds. Wanshik created a teaching method that worked for all of them. His students went on to become engineers, scientists, teachers. They could work across species boundaries because he taught them how. What happened to Wanshik? Kelthor asked quietly. He returned to Earth. He teaches at a university now, just humans. The chairman closed his eyes. What else? Medical databases maintained by Dr. Haijin and her team. Legal frameworks created by human lawyer Min Ho that allowed different species justice systems to interact. Safety standards developed by human engineer Tai Yang that protected workers from 47 species. Entertainment networks run by human coordinator Bo Min that brought joy to billions across the galaxy. Dalvik paused, then continued in a softer voice. Grief counseling services. Human therapist Yunji specialized in helping beings process loss across cultural boundaries. When a Vreks loses a mate, they express it through aggression. When a Luminari experiences grief, they dim and withdraw. When a Nethvoid mourns, they fragment temporarily. Yunji understood all of this. She helped thousands of beings from dozens of species cope with trauma and loss. There is no one to replace her. Did she receive recognition for this work? Kelthor asked, though he already knew the answer. She was nominated for a Council Humanitarian Award 3 times, denied each time. The committee notes indicate they did not believe therapy qualified as humanitarian work. Kelthor wanted to break something. Instead, he asked, what did humanity ask for in return for all these services? Dalvik pulled up another file. I have reviewed all council records for the past 50 years. Human requests fall into consistent patterns. Fair trade route access, equal representation in council votes, consideration of their security concerns, acknowledgement of their contributions, resources for educational and cultural programs. Every request was modest. Every request was documented. Every request was denied or delayed. Why? Kelthor demanded. Why did we deny them? I have reviewed the council's reasoning in each case, Dalvik said carefully. The pattern is clear. Human requests were denied because they were human requests. The council did not take humanity seriously as a species. We saw them as useful servants, not equal partners. I never thought. Kelthor started, then stopped. That was the problem, was it not? He never thought about humans at all. They were just there, in the background, making things work, like furniture or equipment. Dalvik brought up one final document. This is the most damning piece of evidence, Chairman. It is a proposal submitted by Ambassador Taemin 3 years ago. He requested a simple change to council voting procedures. Human concerns would be given the same priority as concerns from any other species. Not special treatment. Just equality. What happened to the proposal? It was denied within 24 hours. The reasoning stated that making such a change would set a precedent that minor species might demand equal treatment. Dalvik let that sink in. We explicitly refused to treat them as equals. Kelthor stared at the document for a long time. Finally, he asked, how much more is on that data chip? We have processed 40%. At our current pace, we will need another 4 months to review everything. How bad is it going to get? Dalvik's crystalline form flickered. Chairman, every new file we open reveals another critical system we did not know existed. The more we discover, the more we realize how little we understood about what held our civilization together. Humanity was not just a member of the Council. They were its foundation. After Dalvik left, Kelthor sat alone in his office, staring at the pile of reports. Outside his window, the Veltara ring spun peacefully in space. Beautiful, majestic, broken. He had been so certain of his superiority. The Vreks were strong, ancient, powerful. What could humans possibly teach them? Everything, it turned out. Humility, for one thing. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so divided. Species that had cooperated for centuries now hurled accusations at each other across the Great Hall. The unity that had once seemed unbreakable was shattering under the weight of economic collapse and infrastructure failure. Chairman Kelthor stood at the podium trying to maintain order. His voice, usually commanding, had grown hoarse from shouting over the chaos. "We will adapt," he insisted for the 100th time. "We simply need to stay unified. The humans will see reason. They will return." Will they? The challenge came from Junior Ambassador Jae-sung, who had grown bolder as the crisis deepened. Why would they return to a council that treated them as servants? We denied every request they made. We ignored every warning they gave. We took their work for granted and gave them nothing in return. Why would they come back to that? Because they need the council as much as we need them, Kelthor shot back, but his words rang hollow even to his own ears. A luminary delegate stood, her crystalline form pulsing with anger. My people are suffering because the Vreks refuse to maintain their portion of the power grid. This is a Vreks failure, not a human one. Your people, a Vreks military commander roared, relied on human integration systems just as much as anyone else. Do not pretend luminary hands are clean. Both of you are missing the point. A Nethvoid representative pulsed through its translator. The problem is not which species failed. The problem is that we all failed to see what the humans were doing for us. But even this moment of clarity could not hold. Within minutes, the chamber descended into arguments again. Old grudges surfaced. Ancient territorial disputes were reopened. Without the humans quietly mediating, translating, and bridging cultural gaps, the council members discovered they did not actually like each other very much. A faction formed around Jae-sung, calling for immediate reconciliation with humanity. They wanted to send a delegation to Earth, to apologize, to beg if necessary. Another faction, led by hardline Vreks conservatives, insisted that showing weakness would destroy the Council's authority. A third group argued for accelerating their own technological development to replace human systems. The Council fractured into a dozen competing interests. Within weeks, 3 species formally withdrew their membership. 5 more suspended their participation. The great alliance that had governed the galaxy for 3 centuries was dying. Meanwhile, in human space, life continued peacefully. Earth and her colonies existed in a bubble of calm, while chaos reigned beyond their borders. The transition to isolation had been seamless because, as it turned out, humanity had been preparing for this possibility for decades. Retired Ambassador Sang-woo, father of current Ambassador Tae-min, sat in his garden in Busan overlooking the sea. A reporter had come to interview him about the withdrawal. Many people are surprised by how smoothly the isolation has gone, the reporter said. Were you planning this for a long time? Sang-woo smiled slightly. Planning? No. Preparing? Yes. After the first 100 times the Council dismissed our concerns, we realized we could not depend on them. So we built redundancy into everything. We trained our own people to handle systems the Council thought only they could manage. We established supply chains that did not depend on alien trade. We created our own infrastructure completely independent of Council systems. But you continued to work with the Council. You continued to help them. Of course. We are not cruel. Just because we prepared to stand alone did not mean we wanted to abandon others. We hoped things would improve. We hoped they would eventually see us as partners instead of servants. Sang-woo's smile faded. They never did, so we left. Do you think they will ask you to return? They already have, unofficially. 3 different species have tried to establish contact through back channels, all asking for help, for technical support, for the systems we use to provide freely. Sang-woo gazed at the ocean. We politely declined. Inside Earth's Foreign Relations headquarters, Director Yoon-ji reviewed the latest requests from the Galactic Council, offers of trade deals, promises of better representation, thinly veiled threats disguised as concerns. She filed them all in the same category, rejected. Her assistant, a young woman named Yoon-ah, seemed troubled. Director, some of these requests are for humanitarian aid, medical supplies, disaster relief. Should we not at least consider those? Yoon-ji looked at her kindly. We are considering them. Each request is reviewed carefully, but we are not the galaxy's emergency service anymore. Let them solve their own problems. Let them build their own systems. Let them learn what we already know, that civilization requires work, cooperation, and mutual respect. That seems harsh, perhaps, but we spent a century doing that work for them, and they never once thanked us. They never acknowledged what we did. They treated our contributions as entitlement, not partnership. If we return now, nothing will change. They will go back to ignoring us, and we will go back to being invisible. No. Let them struggle. Let them understand what they lost. A formal delegation did eventually reach human space, led by Jae-sung. They found Earth's borders heavily defended, not with weapons, but with silence. Their ships were permitted to approach a designated communications station, but no further. Jae-sung delivered his message from the station. The Galactic Council recognizes its errors. We understand now what humanity contributed. We wish to discuss terms for renewed cooperation. The response came from Ambassador Tae-min, transmitted but not in person. His voice was calm and professional. Humanity thanks the Council for their message. However, we are not interested in rejoining the Council at this time. We have found that independence suits us well. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Please, Jae-sung said, and there was genuine desperation in his voice. People are suffering, species are fragmenting, the galaxy is falling apart. Then fix it, Tae-min replied simply. You are all intelligent, capable species. You built great civilizations. Surely you can rebuild the systems we used to maintain. We did it. You can too. But it will take decades, centuries perhaps. Yes, Tae-min agreed. It probably will. That is what happens when you take infrastructure for granted. You will learn, slowly and painfully, to value the people who maintain it. The delegation returned with Tae-min's message. In the council chamber, Kelthor received the news in silence. For the first time, he truly understood. The humans were not coming back. They did not need the council. They never had. The council had needed them. And now, too late. Everyone knew it. That night, Kelthor sat alone and finally read the entire data chip. All 6,000 human contributors, all the services they had provided, all the requests they had made, all the times they had been denied. By dawn, his scales had dulled to a gray color that signified deep shame among the Vreks. He picked up his communication tablet and began to write. Not a negotiation, not a demand, something he should have written years ago, an apology. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council existed in name only. 23 species had formally withdrawn. The economy had contracted by 64%. 3 active conflicts simmered across different sectors. The communication array remained dark. The great civilization that had spanned the stars was reduced to isolated pockets of former glory, each struggling to survive. Chairman Kelthor stood in the empty council chamber. Most delegates no longer bothered attending sessions. There was no point when they could not even communicate effectively with their home worlds. The beautiful hall, once filled with the voices of 47 species working together, now echoed with silence. On his desk sat the complete data chip analysis. Dalvik and her team had finished their work. The final count: 9,317 individual humans had provided critical services to the galactic community. 9,000 people working quietly in the background, unrecognized and unappreciated, holding civilization together. Kelthor had spent months reading their stories. Engineer Ji Woo, who had maintained the refineries. Cartographer Dong Hyun, who had mapped the safe routes. Dr. Hai Jin, who had saved countless lives through her medical databases. Systems architect Seong Ho, who had unified the fleet coordination. Merchant Captain Bo-Ra, who had protected the trade lanes, but also the ones whose names he had never known. Teacher Wan Shik, who had educated children. Therapist Yoonji, who had helped beings process grief. Cultural coordinator Bo Min, who had brought joy. Legal expert Min Ho, who had mediated disputes. Safety engineer Tae Yang, who had protected workers. Every single one had asked for so little: recognition, respect, fair treatment. Kelthor had denied them all, not out of malice, but out of blindness. He had simply never seen them as equals. Now he finally understood. The problem was not just what the Council had failed to do, it was what the Council had failed to be. They had built a hierarchy where some species mattered more than others. They had created a system where contributions were measured by military power and economic strength, not by the actual work that held society together. Humans had no mighty fleets. Their economy was modest, their territory was small. By the Council's measures, they were insignificant. But by any measure that actually mattered, they had been the most important species in the galaxy. Kelthor drafted a message to Earth. It took him 3 weeks to write. He discarded version after version, trying to find words adequate to the situation. Finally, he settled on the truth. Ambassador Tai Min, the message began, I am writing not as chairman of the Galactic Council, but as someone who has spent a year confronting his own failures. The Council treated humanity poorly. I treated humanity poorly. We took your work for granted, dismissed your concerns, and denied you the respect you deserved. This was not an oversight. It was systemic prejudice. We did not value you because we measured species by the wrong criteria. I cannot undo the past. I cannot restore the lives lost to our negligence. I cannot give back the years of thankless service. But I can acknowledge the truth. Humanity held this civilization together, and we never thanked you. I am not asking you to return to the Council. I am not asking you to forgive us. I am asking for something simpler and harder. Teach us how you moved forward without resentment. Because the Council is drowning in it. Species blame each other. Old hatreds resurface. We cannot work together because we never learned how. You somehow did. You integrated dozens of incompatible species and made them work as one. How? If you choose not to respond, I will understand. You owe us nothing. But if you have any wisdom to share, any guidance for a galaxy trying to rebuild itself, I would be grateful to hear it. He signed it simply, Kelthor, formerly of the Galactic Council. The message traveled through the old communication networks, slow and uncertain, until it reached Earth 3 weeks later. Ambassador Taemin read it in his office in Seoul. He sat in silence for a long time, then called a meeting. They gathered in a conference room overlooking the city. Ambassador Taemin, Director Yoonji, retired Ambassador Sang-woo, and representatives from across human space. Also present were many of the people named in the Council's reports: Ji-woo, Dong-hyun, Hye-jin, Sung-ho, Bo-Ra, Wan-shik, Min-ho, Tai-yang, and dozens more. Chairman Kelthor has sent an apology, Taemin told them. He is asking for help, not asking us to return, asking us to teach them how to rebuild. We owe them nothing. Jiwoo said flatly. I spent 12 years maintaining systems they never appreciated. Why should I help them now? Because it is the right thing to do, Dr. Hai-jin said quietly. People are dying from medical failures, not council bureaucrats, ordinary beings who had nothing to do with the decisions made against us. She is right, Dong-hyun added. The traders using my routes were not responsible for the council's prejudice. They were just trying to make a living. The debate lasted for hours. Anger, hurt, and resentment poured out. These were people who had dedicated their lives to helping others, only to be treated as invisible. The wounds were deep. Finally, Won-shik spoke. I teach children, human children now, instead of multiple species, and you know what I have noticed? They are missing something. The kids I taught on Station 7 learned to see beyond their own species. They learned that different minds think differently, and that is a strength. My students here are brilliant, but they only know humanity. We are becoming isolated, and isolation makes us smaller. What are you saying? Tae-min asked. I am saying that we left the council to protect ourselves. That was necessary. But if we stay isolated forever, we lose something important. We lose the part of ourselves that builds bridges. Won-shik looked around the room. Every person here chose a career that connected species. We were not weapons designers or pure researchers. We were integrators. It is who we are. Do we want to stop being that? Silence fell over the room. Finally, retired Ambassador Sang-woo spoke. I advised the withdrawal because the council did not respect us. But Won-shik is right. We did not become bridge builders for recognition. We did it because the work mattered, because helping others mattered. Has that changed? Tae-min looked at the faces around the table. Slowly, he saw the anger transform into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. If we help them, he said carefully, it will be on our terms, not as members of the council, as independent contractors, fair payment for our work, mutual respect, real partnership. And the council must restructure to ensure no species is ever taken for granted again. Those are harsh terms, Director Yoonji noted. They are fair terms, Tae-min corrected. The galaxy nearly destroyed itself through arrogance. They need to build something better. We can help them do that, but not by returning to the old system. A vote was called. It was not unanimous. Some voted to maintain complete isolation, but the majority chose to extend a conditional offer of assistance. Tae-min drafted the response carefully. Chairman Kelthor, humanity will provide technical assistance and training to help species rebuild their own systems, not as members of the council, but as independent partners. Our terms are as follows: fair compensation for all services, genuine representation in decision-making processes that affect us, and structural reforms to the council to ensure equality among all species. Additionally, we will help develop training programs so that each species can maintain their own systems in the future. We will not return as your invisible maintenance crew. We will partner with you as equals or not at all. The message concluded. These terms are non-negotiable. If the council cannot accept them, we wish you well and will maintain our current isolation. The choice is yours. Kelthor received the message and called an emergency session. For the first time in months, the chamber filled. Species that had withdrawn sent representatives. Everyone understood this was the last chance. The debate was fierce. The old guard resisted. Accepting human terms meant admitting the council's fundamental structure was flawed. It meant giving up power. It meant changing everything. But Jae-sung stood and delivered a speech that silenced the opposition. We have a choice. We can cling to our pride and watch civilization collapse completely. Or we can accept that we were wrong, learn from it, and build something better. The humans are not asking for revenge. They are not demanding we suffer as they suffered. They are offering partnership. If we are too proud to accept that, then we deserve the darkness we have created. The vote was close, but it passed. The Council accepted humanity's terms. The process of rebuilding was slow and painful. Human teachers like Wan Shik traveled to alien worlds to train local engineers in maintaining their own systems. They did not just fix problems, they taught others how to fix them. Human diplomats like Taemin helped restructure the Council, creating safeguards against the marginalization of any species. Jiwoo returned to Kepler 7th, but not alone. She brought a team of Rex engineers, and together they rebuilt the refinery systems. This time, the Vrex understood how it worked. Dong-hyun shared his navigation methods, training cartographers from a dozen species. Hyejin opened her medical databases and showed other doctors how to maintain and expand them. The galaxy did not return to what it was before. It became something new. The Council reformed into a more equitable structure. Species learned to value all contributions, not just military might. The humans who returned did so as respected partners, working alongside beings who now understood the value of their work. In his garden in Busan, retired Ambassador Sang-woo watched the stars and smiled. His son had done well. Humanity had done well. They had faced injustice and responded not with revenge, but with dignity. They had departed quietly, forcing the galaxy to confront its own failures, and when asked to help rebuild, they had chosen partnership over isolation. It would take decades, perhaps centuries, for the scars to fully heal. But the new galaxy being born was better than the old one, more just, more equal, more aware that civilization is not maintained by the powerful, but by those willing to do the invisible work that holds society together. Humanity had taught the galaxy that lesson, not through war or conquest, but simply by walking away. Sometimes, Sang-woo reflected, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be taken for granted. The stars shone bright above him, full of possibility.